Welcome to the TOWTalk podcast. I'm Denise, your co-host, and I'm here with Neil, and we have a special guest today. This candidate, Frank Dandanto. He's running for the Town Supervisor position for the Town of Wallkill. Welcome, Frank. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm a big fan. I got to tell you,
We have another
just
fan.
yeah, it's true. I was just mentioning earlier about how it's really important that podcasts like this start to really take root in the community because there's this real lack of community information flow, and you guys are doing a stellar job at touching base on the important subjects and actually fleshing them out for the public. It's really good.
Thank you. Thank you. We hope to keep this going and keep the public informed. So
Yeah.
so tell us, give us a little bit of your background. I'm sure our audience would love to hear about you.
Sure thing. Well, for those who are unfamiliar with me, I am the former supervisor of the town of Walkill. I held the seat from 2020 to 2021. Uh, and At the time, I was not a politician. I don't consider myself a politician even to this day. I am and will probably always be a public advocate. I started out as an environmental advocate, and around 2010, the western part of the town of Walkill, where I live, which butts up against the town of Mamakating, was going through some some extremely high density development projects that were basically being backdoored by the town and village boards. And it was obviously very concerning to me because it was local. I actually discovered it, believe it or not, on having a conversation with a mother at pickup at the elementary school. I was picking up one of my children, and we were lamenting about the water pressure. And so that was a gateway to, hey, did you know that there is this high density build out that's occurring right off the kill? And that was my entrance. So with a small group of people, we built the Rural Community Coalition. And from that, there was the Rural Heritage Party, and we made a concerted, rather bold effort to try to stem that development to some extent. And in the process of that, believe it or not, the CBP project was going on, and that brought me to the town of Walkill and in front of then Supervisor Ed Diana. And I was there only as an advocate to suggest that perhaps the town consider some air quality control monitoring that the city of Middletown had agreed to do.
I
And
remember that.
Mr. Diana was kind enough to tell me that I was above my pay grade. And
I
Wow.
remember that too. I remember
uh,
that too.
yeah,
Wow,
that
that
he said that in public. I think if they were
He
recording
did.
at the
He
time,
did.
you can probably find that out there. So needless to say, I was a little put back by that and decided that, Mr. Diana isn't the end all be all for the world of Town of Wallkill. And then shortly after that, believe it or not, he had the dubious distinction of presenting the town budget. And of course, he had now perked my interest, and I was very keen on paying attention to what Mr. Diana had to say at all about anything Town of Wallkill related. And so he went through the budget, and none of it, not one thing, made sense.
wow.
It was just
That's not surprising.
mind-boggling to me. It was quite literally an advertisement for "Isn't Town of Wallkill awesome?" and had no historical support in the reporting construction. None of the line items in terms of the P&L process was evident at all. There was no income-based or revenue-based reporting of any kind. It didn't coincide with the expenses. The expenses had vacant lines. So that was it. That was the catalyst. I was like, I am not above my pay grade on this one. It doesn't take a genius to see that the budget isn't working. I don't know what's happening at the town of Walkill. I don't understand this guy at Diana. He's a legacy guy. He's clearly a shady guy. I'm going to run against him, and I did, and I won shockingly. I mean, I think when you're in politics for 20 some odd years or 30 some odd years, you can't spend that long in front of the public and not be seen for what you are.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that was the reality that Mr. Diana faced. He had spent a lot of time under a lot of scrutiny. And you can't do the song and dance. The snake oil trick doesn't work unless the audience is changing. And if you're at the town, the audience isn't changing. So yeah, so that's the story of how I got to the chair, and it didn't take me really very long at all, about 3.5 months, to realize not only was I correct in the assessment on the town books, but the problem was really big. And about 6 months in, it became extremely clear to me that it wasn't just the problem, that it was systemic within the system of how the town was actually keeping its books. About 7 months, between 6 and 7 months in, I actually believed that there might actually be some nefarious stuff occurring at the town.
Wow, really?
And yeah, I'll never forget the board meeting I walked into. We went. I'm I'm going to put this all out on the table. I'm sure someone's going to scream and yell about it. But we went into an executive session, and I turned to the board and said, "We have a real problem. Like this isn't just a reporting problem. Like I think there's a problem." And I had expected, in my naivete, assuming that we were all there to do the right thing by the town, that that would be welcomed information, or information that we would have all acted on in a positive way to try to get to the bottom of what's transpiring in the town finances. And instead, almost instantaneously within that meeting itself, um, town board members turned on me, and I mean
Wow.
really turned on me, and that carried on until the end of the election cycle that year,
Yeah,
or the following
that's,
year. Yeah,
that right there raises flags. You know,
yeah, yeah.
if they're
It
not
was
willing to sit down and just have a conversation, if they
right.
immediately turn and get defensive, then, that I mean, if this is just my personal opinion, that would tell me that there's something going on, and maybe I need to dig a little further.
Well,
It's so.
I
Go ahead,
walked
man.
into so Frank knows this. I've told him this story. So that year that he talks about when Ed Diana did that budget, I walked into so every year I had asked for certain information that as a town board member and according to town law I'm supposed to have, right? And some projections, financial information, details, what we're buying, like basic things that as a board member, like we should all know. Like if we're going to buy a big truck, like I should know that we're going to buy a big truck. If we're going to take out a loan next year, I should know that we're going to take out a loan. If we're going to hire people, we're going to, let me know who we're going to hire, right?
Exactly.
Like basic budgetary things. And I walked in, and every year I had walked into the comptroller's office and I had asked for that information. And for the most part, I would get some of it. Never all of it, but I would get some of it. Um, and that year I had walked in and it was flat out, no. Ed Diana said no, that you're not getting anything. And I'm
Incredible.
like, right, it was like, what, like I even thought that was completely nuts, right? It was very upsetting to me. And then Ed, like me and Ed got into a big argument about it. He wouldn't give me the information, and then I had to threaten to sue him. I had to file an article, like it literally was. My attorney calls Ed on the phone and says, my client's about to file an Article 78 against you, and you're in the middle of an election against Frank. you know that's how that went down. So Ed scrambled, and then the day of the vote he turns everything over to me, right? He turned everything over to me, but by that point in time I had no time to review it, which is why I didn't vote for the budget that year. It was a trend, right? It was just common. This is what they did. This is how they operated. And you can see it now with their current budget where they have no historical data at all. It's literally just this is the requested line,
Well, I mean,
so
and to that point, they wouldn't be able to have any historical data anyway. Their books have been out of date for years, so
true.
there would be
Right.
nothing to track against that would be legitimate.
And they
The thing that's sort of interesting to me about all of this is that as I know Neil is too, I'm a lifelong community resident. I grew up in Middletown. I went away for a little while. My my profession is that of a lighting designer and a production manager. So I did my stint in New York City. I'm now back. Came back out of the community when I had my daughter in '99, and moved back to the community in 2004, fully, not just as a place to get out on the weekends, but actually commute into the city. And I can tell you, growing up, while I was growing up, my father was the marshal for the city of Middletown. He was the city of Middletown marshal. And I grew up in an area in Ward 1 in the city of Middletown that was predominantly police officers. So and police officers to the left of me, and police officers 2 doors down, and a police officer behind me, and a detective to the other. So a lot of police officers. Dad's in the court office. I'm spending, I'm spending a lot of time hanging out in the court, and getting to know all these, police officers and whatnot. And as I was coming of age at 16 and starting to drive, all of them, every one of them, including my father, and my father was extremely specific about this. He said, don't at all play games in Walkill. Not in Walkill, not in Montgomery. And I obviously didn't understand that at 16. But after a little while, I pressed and said, I don't understand what the problem is. I should be able to be free to drive wherever I wanted to drive, and as long as I'm abiding by the speed limits. And I had a sporty little car, and living my best life at the age of 16. And he came out and said, listen, Town of Wallkill has a reputation. And that was back in 87, 88. And then of course the feds came in and had to completely reorganize the police department because of the practices at the Town of Wallkill. So the Town of Wallkill's got a long history of flirting with the wrong way to do things. And yeah. And
can I make one point
please,
there?
please.
Just 1 point in association with that. They were put under federal monitoring, right, in the early 2000s. There is a board member. There is a board member who currently is serving on the town board, who's running for county legislator, who is on that board and knew about what was going on and did nothing about it until the feds came in. So
Yeah,
I just want to point that out too, that happened, and that's a real thing, right? And he's still on, and he still got elected, and is still on that board to this day. And so again, he's in charge of all the nefarious things that are going on. So it's very interesting. Nothing's changed.
Yeah, I think it's telling that the default mechanism for the Town of Walkill is to do shady stuff. And the reality, as I'm sure that Neil, I know Neil talked through some of his experiences early on when he first got into office. Mine were very, very similar. And, it just, old habits die hard. If they die at all, they come back. And I think that the reality is that for a community like ours of 30, I think we're at 37,000 or 33,000 folks, a good chunk of those individuals transplanted out of the metropolitan area. There are still some individuals here who have been around for a long time, lifers, as I like to refer to us. It's troubling that we cannot seem to move the dial here, and probably even more concerning that when the situation that I was just sort of alluding to, and Neil has talked about with reference to the budget and the inconsistencies in the bookkeeping, when we rang the alarm, and I know Neil was he trumpeted it before I showed up. I mean, for me, I'm sure it was a little bit easier because it was really the only thing that I was pushing on. For Neil, he had already sat at the table for a little while, and I'm quite certain, his experiences were more broad. But his background is in accounting. Like all I had to fall back on was the fact that I had owned my own business, so I was familiar with QuickBooks, and my family circle. My sister is she's a partner at Deloitte, and I don't know if you know those guys, but they're rather well known for their accounting practices and principles. She manages large clients. At the time, she had just come off of the oil for money, or the oil for food. That was it. The oil for food audit, the UN audit that with Paul Volcker. And so she was part of Paul Volcker's circle. She was part of the initial team that went into the UN to do the audit there. So, I spent, holiday after holiday listening to forensic accounting and forensic this and forensic and accounting that and accounting the other thing. And let me tell you, and I know it's very exciting to Neil, but it's not so exciting to me, but it did stick. And
We have
so,
one topic
yeah,
that we like to talk about.
yeah, that's real. That is I can attest that that is real. But the sad reality is that it's really pretty simple. If if the ledger doesn't square up, then the ledger doesn't square up. Like the funny thing about math is, well, math doesn't lie unless you force it to lie.
Correct.
And so yeah, it was shocking to me to be met with that kind of resistance, and met with that kind of vitriol and vigor.
Yeah.
Like they came after me like
Yeah.
hard.
Listen, I had the attorney that was hired, right? Just so you know, like this is how funny it is, right? Because what you said is exactly true. Like if you go into accounting, it's like being a lawyer, right? Like you have one topic, you know it, and you talk about it a lot, right? Like I think I said it the other day. Like we like to talk about accounting, we like to gossip about accounting, we like to, like that's what we like to do, and the attorney who investigated the case, right? Like it, literally said to me to my face that I have an unhealthy obsession with accounting.
Clearly, she
Like
knows.
Like, I
Clearly,
don't
she
even know
doesn't
what
know
that
any
means.
accountants.
I was like, come on, like I'm like, that's my profession. Like seriously, like you have an unhealthy, obsession with the law. How about that?
Yeah.
Like I was like, what? It was like such a joke. It was honestly like, what a joke. Like I really thought, like when she said that to me, I was like, you're a joke. You're a joke. You literally just stole from the town and you're a joke. Sorry, continue, Frank. I just
No, I
I
mean,
thought
I
that
don't want
was
to.
an interesting tidbit,
I don't want to. I don't want to monopolize this entire
Well, no,
podcast off
that's
of
we're
one
here
No.
to talk
one
about. I mean,
story, but and I'm
well,
sure you have questions. So if
so
something pops up, feel free to jump in. But yes,
well, wow, where do I get? Well, we did a two-part episode regarding the finances. Neil brought a lot of receipts to that.
yeah,
Um, we just before you logged in, we were just reviewing some information. He took a look at your opponent, and a video that he's posting, wherein he clearly states the finances are fine. There's nothing to worry about. Um, but we found out um, that last year, I believe it was in April of last year, the town lost its credit rating, its bond rating, and
yes.
so
But there's nothing to worry about
but
because
there's
that's
nothing to
typically
worry about.
that's
S-
normal.
So can you
Right.
talk a little bit about that and what we can do, what you as supervisor can do to help repair the finances and get our bond rating back?
Yeah, that's it. That first of all, it is just to take two steps back.
It's a big one,
Because
right?
that is a big one. So my opponent my opponent is a relatively sound individual who in that infamous meeting that everybody has seen that's circled around the internet a couple hundred times. It was the meeting where the town board confronted me about the reporting that there was, and there were lots of people that stood up in my defense and talk a little bit about why there was this huge problem at the accounting office. Um, my opponent literally told me to my face that night. I pled with him. Now, Neil will tell you, I pled with everybody. I was like, look, say what you will about me, do what you want to do. The reality here is real. Like this is a real thing. I really think that there's a problem and it requires investigating. I mean, I went all the way up. Neil stood next to me as we spoke to Dave Hoover on I believe it was a police community board meeting, and we cornered him. And I said to him, "Look, I don't really even care anymore. I'm not going to run. Like I can't get anybody to listen to me." I called the Association of Towns. I called the comptroller's office. Everybody really was reticent to get involved, and Association of Towns, we really don't comment on such things. Like the town has to do its own due diligence in this process. The comptroller's office was mildly interested, but not so much so that they were engaged. So I had talked to everybody, really, quite literally, as an individual, not as a supervisor, but hey, as another taxpayer. Look, there's a problem. Like I don't care if you don't vote for me. Pay attention to what's happening here,
Right.
people.
These are your
And
taxes. These are your tax
yeah,
payments.
these are your tax dollars, and they're being something's happening to them that I'm pretty sure you're not going to be happy with.
Right.
Um, and my opponent looked me dead in the eye. I'll never forget this. And I won't forget it because of how it came across that at that instance, but it has resurged. It has had a resurgence. He said to me, he looked me deadpan right in the eyes and said, "Prove it." And that's where it left. And now that's back. Like, you can't say there's anything wrong with the books because you can't prove there's anything wrong with the books, except for we can, except for we have, except
Right.
for thanks to Neil and his good record keeping. We've been able to prove it time and time again. So the simple fact of the matter is there really is something wrong with the books. It is not a joke. It's not made up. Um, you can't say that there's nothing wrong with the books. There's only something wrong with the reporting. That is in at the heart of it the problem because you don't
Right.
know what you don't know. Like, you can't
Right.
say that I have $100 in my bank account if you haven't balanced your checkbook in the last 3 months and you've written 7 checks and each one a $25 check. I mean, the math doesn't math.
Right.
So
Right.
One of the things that just to point what Frank is saying, right? One of the things that was a huge issue in the town that Frank that every supervisor had to deal with was water loss. Okay, if you don't have current records and you're not analyzing the financial information, you don't know if your billings are correct, if you're collecting enough. You don't know these things, right? Like, so what ended up happening is that the town was suffering from huge water loss. Okay, so there were a number of leaks, and then there were also a number of customers, I guess we can call them, or residents or whoever,
Yeah.
where their water meters weren't either hooked up properly or weren't hooked up at all. And this wasn't just like the councilman, right? Like, this was all over town, right? Like, there were people who were getting bills that said just $0, but were utilizing water because there was a disconnect, but that wasn't being analyzed. Nobody was looking at that. Nobody even, so when Frank came in, and to give him his props on this, when Frank came in, one of the first things Frank did was he noticed that, right? And he decided to dedicate one of the employees to figuring that out.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Because we keep hearing Frank retasked employees. Well, if some people aren't being billed for water usage and other people are being billed for water usage, you have to figure that crap out.
Exactly.
And they
yeah,
didn't want that figured out. They were, they were like, just put a blind eye, don't worry about it. Nobody else has cared about it in the past, so you're not going to care about it now. Well, that's what having financial information does for you. Is that that. And he didn't know that necessarily from just looking at the financial information. O'Connor Davies came in and told us that was a problem.
yeah,
Okay.
that's real. And I will also say too, to the credit of the town employees, much of what I learned about what was happening and what is currently happening at the town came from the town employees, and they were very forthcoming. It's like the open secret that everybody understood that there was shady stuff happening at the water department based on certain individuals who were getting passes on their bills. There was, a long-standing, I would go as far as to say maybe feud with the water department and the town council over how to address the infrastructure issues in terms of budgeting. And I will also say, certainly to the credit of the commissioner of DPW at the time, Lou Ingrassia, he was phenomenal and tremendously patient. Maybe for me, a little too patient, because one of my things was, I can't believe you guys aren't saying stuff about this. And
That's right.
there was an unspoken rule that you didn't challenge the town council, and I think that what the reason for that was made crystal clear upon my departure. There are 22 firings, 22. firings at town hall. 22. Um,
Really?
11 firings of women specifically inside of the 18-month period right after my
Right.
uh, departure.
That's
Uh,
very interesting.
oh
So
yeah, no, there was a
right.
long and illustrious history of making sure everybody understood who was in charge.
Right.
And yeah, and I think that that's, like I said, to the credit of the town employees, perhaps maybe they saw in me an opportunity to right some, historic wrongs, but
They did.
they, yeah,
They did.
they
Well,
really, came forward. Yeah, go ahead.
let me ask you a question. So, do you think those firings were directly related, and they were sort
Oh,
of like hostile
absolutely.
retaliation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No question about that. And I think I can say definitively that in at least 3 of them, I know for a point of fact that they were exactly that.
Wow.
Because there were no issues specific to any kind of work. There was no historical HR documentation to show that there was any work product issue whatsoever.
I would get I got complaints after Frank left from a number of female employees that there were comments about how they were dressing. There were comments about certain people um not being willing to to go on record, right? In other words, they were coercing people to testify against Frank, and if you were unwilling to do that, then you got retaliated against, and that was a real
Wow.
thing. All
Yeah,
right. So I had gotten complaints about that. Like people used to, people still come to me and tell me, that and because this stuff is still going on, right? Like we just saw the lawsuit come in against the supervisor in the town board for the firing. It was reported to me that somebody went in for a job and they said, "Well, you're not who we hire."
Oh,
You know? I mean, this kind of crap, like, is unacceptable in government. It's just unacceptable behavior.
yeah.
it is what occurs when you run a fiefdom. When
Yes.
you have
Yeah.
a few small people in a room and they have no accountability to anybody,
Yep.
and they have set up enough hurdles so that anybody who would have the wherewithal to hold them accountable is either persuaded not to, or just doesn't because they don't have the wherewithal. Um, I was ridiculously familiar with this. I watched this happen in the village of Bloomingburg. I watched the village board at the time literally make choices that were the uh, antithetic. That word, yeah, I think it might be
Antithetical.
antithetic. Yeah, antithetical to
Antithesis. Yeah.
yeah to um, the stated goal of the community. Like this, we want to go left. They were going right the whole time. They're saying no, we're going left. While they were in the back room cutting deals to go right. And uh, so it was shocking to me that in the town of Walkill that I thought was a little bit more pulled together. And of course, I will say, uh, you know, 50-year-old Frank forgot what 16-year-old Frank heard from his father, and that resonated. And I will also tell you because Lou and Gracia's office was right next to mine, and we grew up together. Um, and I think Lou could attest to you. I said every single day, I still joke about this every single day. Damn it, my father was right. Because he made all these observations, years and years and years ago. Um, the reality here, though, is this: uh, if that insulary group is left unchecked, then they can operate out in the open, which is why it was an open secret. It's like, well, we don't talk about it, but everybody knows that so and so doesn't have any accountability to their water bill, and so can hire and fire whomever they want and we just have to get in line.
Because there's
So
no oversight.
yeah,
it
there was
was it
no
was
zero oversight, zero.
it was very telling. It was very telling. So, and I want to get to this part too. So this kind of leads into what I want to talk about with Frank next. Um when Frank first got into office, he was faced, right, with overwhelming, overwhelming pressure all over the place because we had just entered a pandemic.
Yes.
Okay. And a lot of people don't remember that it was Frank that got us through that. Okay. It was his leadership that got us through that. And so I do want to get into that next. But, um, kind of what he was talking about is this idea that when we went into the pandemic, Frank said, we can't be together anymore. So he got a Zoom account and we started to do the Zoom, right? And then, so all our work sessions were for the public. Okay.
This was a great
And
idea.
as soon as they announced that we could come back into the office, okay, they were immediately like, let's get rid of the Zoom, right? Because they didn't like having to be on record and being recorded. Okay. And Frank said no. Frank said no. And you could tell how telling that is, right? In everything that's going on, because immediately after, they got rid of the Zoom.
Yeah, we don't
I
see
was
any.
gone, immediately after Frank was gone, they got rid of the Zoom altogether because they don't want any recorded record of what they say because the things that they say are not good. But I do want to get back to what Frank, to Frank here, because I always kind of wanted to ask him, like that was a really difficult time for all of us, right? And he had to really make a lot of tough decisions. One of the first decisions that he had to make was to declare emergency status for the town. Okay.
Can
And
you just
it really,
define what that means?
well, that's what I want him to talk about because
Okay.
that immediately set off conflict with the board. So I want him to kind of go in because I really think it's very telling, right? This was like his first 3 months in office. He's having to declare a state of emergency because we're in an epidemic. And instead of his board supporting his decisions and offering to help, right, they immediately went after him. And I want him to talk about that because I really think it's better coming from him than me retelling that story because it was really a story he told me.
Okay.
It was obviously a terrible time, and the only thing I could think of at that point was just lean into all of the leadership stuff that I've had kind of building up in me as a kid. I was an active scout, and I am an Eagle Scout, so there was a whole lot of leadership built into that process. And my family structure it was a very structured, very focused on civics and leadership component. Um, with my father being very tied to both the politics and the support at the city of Middletown. So, 2.5 months in, we end up with this pandemic. And the very first thing that came to my mind was, well, we clearly can't, like, we can't close up the town. Like, that's not a thing.
Right. Yeah.
So, so I immediately, I think the governor at the time was uh, either had just declared the state of emergency or was in the process of declaring a state of emergency. And I contacted the town attorney at the time and said, I think that we are going to need to do something here really quickly because I feel like if we don't, if we're on the backside of this discussion and not on the front of this discussion, we're not going to be able to set the tone with the state.
Okay.
Um, and from a posture place, from a political place, I wanted to be in in that discussion rather than done to by the state. I wanted to be at the table, and I thought that the only way really to be at the table was to just deal with the town as though it lived in a vacuum. And what would I do if I could do anything that I could do to help the situation? And what were the grounds that I needed to have in place for that to occur? And did I have those? And so I contacted the town attorney and I said, look, here's the situation. Obviously, the state is gearing up for a state of emergency. This is obviously a tragedy.
Yeah.
What do we do? He was kind enough to walk me through what my obligations were, what my legal rights were as a supervisor for the town, according to New York State. And he said, you as the executive for the town, you can actually declare a state of emergency. That's something that you can do. It's a 90-day state, and you would have to renew that. But you can do that now as the executive for the town.
Got it.
And I immediately said, yeah, we have to do that. I think that that's the very first step that we have to do, because then we can, as a town board, go back in and then figure out who needs to be around and who can work remotely, and what services are going to be available and what services are not. Obviously, I need individuals to be at the water plant, so those individuals on municipal water will be able to get that, and municipal sewer.
That makes
Obviously, the
sense.
police department has to be engaged. First responders are like critical linchpin in this discussion. They need to be completely supported wholeheartedly. Who do we have to support that? We really only have the DPW. We're going to need to have the DPW looped into this discussion. And then from an administrative end, all of the administrative support individuals, we're going to have to be at the table. So really the services of the town weren't going away. In fact, we had to bolster them so that they would be able to continue in this situation. And so after speaking to the town attorney, I let the town board know that I was going to do this, and I immediately got a very nasty phone call from one of the councilmen, who told me that, again, I was out of my wheelhouse, and that above my pay grade, and that I couldn't do the thing that I was told by the town attorney that I could do,
Eh,
because oh, go ahead.
yeah. So a councilman, you're the supervisor, right?
Yeah,
You're the top executive in the town government.
that
We're
is
all
that.
equal. Town government's all the councilman is equal to the supervisor. The supervisor just runs the day-to-day operations. But Frank isn't wrong in this instance,
So
because it was an emergency.
as
Exactly.
the supervisor, I'm tasked with the
Right.
responsibility of running the town.
Right.
Right.
And since I am the point person for that um, process, there are some things that I can do that are within the realms of my ability that allow me an opportunity to pivot in real time.
Okay.
So it may not be it may not be possible to get the town board all pulled together for some critical decision that has to be made. And so the supervisor is empowered with the ability to make some of those decisions on his or her own, and then convene the town board immediately thereafter, and we're off to the races. And the issue that this individual had with that statement was that he felt that I needed to go to committee to exercise that executive privilege, which I didn't, and so there was no there there, but this individual wanted to make a there there, and didn't want to be in a situation where they were dictated to in any way, and they made it very clear that that was not something that was going to be, that they were going to be happy with. The long and the short of it was, I declared a state of emergency. The town board validated the state of emergency by resolution. We proceeded forward to renew that resolution every 90 days per the state law, and we were off to the races. Really, at the end of the day, aside from the act of levying the emergency, the state of emergency, there was no real reason to not do the state of emergency. In fact, actually, by doing that,
No, I agree.
we positioned ourselves actually to be one of only, I think, maybe 4 municipalities that actually stayed functional in the state,
Yes.
fully functional. We were very clear to come in, and because again, the
That's an
administrative role.
accomplishment. That's an
I think
accomplishment.
so. I think so. I mean, we didn't stumble. I think we had 1 day or 2 days where we were reorganizing the interior so that we could set up distancing according to the state, and then the state judicial system had placed a stay on court activity, we continued to run the court office and process speeding violations, parking violations, stuff of that nature, and actually really, I think, spearheaded a way of streamlining that process for individuals so that they didn't have to wait for a court date, or if they, they were just going to plead guilty anyway, they could just mail in their fine and call it good, and all of that process. So the town's revenue didn't dip nearly as badly as it could have in that period, and as it did in many other municipalities.
I
So we,
think
yeah,
I think one thing, not to interrupt Frank, but one thing he did, which the state of emergency allowed him to do, was this idea. If so, you have to take yourself back to that time frame. If somebody had COVID in your office, nobody even knew what it meant, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, there were people in the hospital, people were dying. I mean, it was a crazy, crazy time. So if somebody turned up a positive in your office, you had to have the entire office like deep cleaned,
yes,
right? Like,
Wow.
shut down and
Yeah.
fumigated. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Now imagine
Yeah.
you have an office, right? You have to imagine having to convene the entire board to make the decision to do the deep cleaning that you needed, right? Like, I mean, that's what the emergency status allowed him to do. It allowed him to make decisions, all right, about
Common
the health
sense.
and welfare, common sense, the health and welfare of the employees. And that's what some of the board members were against, right? Like they were against that because they wanted to, right. Even though they didn't want to come in the office, they were like, oh, we'll just wait till next Wednesday to make that decision, right? Like it wasn't, it was a crazy, crazy time. And not for
yeah,
nothing, I want to throw something else at Frank because this is something that doesn't get talked enough about too. All right. One of the reasons that this financial thing came up, right, was we get a lot of state funding, right? You get sales tax from the state, state tax, right? The sales tax. You get your grants that all come from the state. There's a lot of money that comes into the town of Walkill from the state. And we were told that we were going to, I mean, we got notification, not once, not twice, like it was literally like almost a daily event, right? And even like at the county levels, Newhouse was who was running these daily calls saying sales tax is going to be down, sales taxes. We were being told that there was going to be a 20% decrease in state funding for the town.
Wow.
20%. And we're not just talking sales tax. We were talking 20% across the board. Grants, sales tax, everything. And at that point in time, when you start getting these messages, right? These alerts that are coming in,
Yeah.
and they were
Yeah.
coming in to me and Frank and the entire board, it was like, okay, well, how much money do we have? Right? Like your first question is, wait a minute, if we're not getting our money and we budgeted to spend this amount of money and we have to spend more money because of the pandemic,
Where
do we
where
have it?
is it?
We have it, right? Like, what do we have? So Frank was like, I need to see some numbers. I need to see bank statements. I need to see some numbers, right? Continue,
yeah,
Frank.
Yeah.
Tell us.
no,
I mean, that was a real
This is a
thing.
very
That was
simple question.
yeah.
that was like
Listen,
a really simple
What's-
question. No
What's in the
less.
Yeah.
bank account? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, it's funny that occurred because that's exactly the response that I got. But it is true that again, that first my administration, which is only 2 years, but still so much occurred. Inside that first 3 months, had I not had any of the back support for knowing how to pivot and redirecting the offices and all the rest of that, I would have been lost. And there's no question about that. I would have been lost. But I was savvy to, how to manage a crisis. Again, my theater background, when you're doing live entertainment and that something doesn't work that's supposed to work and you're sitting in front of 2,000 or 10,000 people, that could become a real issue unless you
Yeah.
keep a cool head. So I really leaned in on that stuff, and that was very, very successful. I think we were able to, segregate the offices and keep all of the offices functioning and operational. We sent some folks to work from home, and the remote work part of this conversation was something that also kept us alive. But Neil is right. We did these meetings every day. Stephen Newhouse did a meeting every day.
Remember
basically
that?
it went through the health and capacities of the hospitals. It went through the death rates at the time. uh, Garnet was overrun, and
Yeah.
there was a whole thing about that. But each one of those things revolved around what was going to happen with the sales tax and the dip in the sales tax, and how that was going to affect us. And so I instantaneously turned to the comptroller at that time and I said, I need to know what exactly is in the fund balance. I don't not roughly what's in the fund balance. I need to know what's hitting on the fund balance. I need to know what's hitting on our accounts right now. I need to know where the money is, and I need to be able to make a resolution to move monies as necessary out of that fund balance into emergency accounts so they can bolster these paychecks, because a lot of people at that time were not working, right? And
Right.
so the state was kind enough to, and the federal government was kind enough to create these windows. But for us, while it was important that they all get paid, for me specifically, it was more important that the machine continue to function. And so I
Yeah.
really needed everybody at the table. And I needed to make sure that there wasn't going to be a reason for someone to not want to be at the table. And you know, I had known that the bank accounts were not functional as of February. You know, we get in, I swore in January. In February, we take in the taxes. So in February, we're flush, right? I'm thinking about this like a business, right? So, and my business is seasonal, so I get it. So, you know, you run dry a little bit towards the end of the fall and the winter, but build season comes in January, February, everybody's money is budgeted, is realigned, and so you're off to the races. So same true with the town. Taxes come in on February, so everybody's account should be flush come March 1. And that was not the case. And that was the first thing that was the big yellow flag.
Okay.
It turned into a big red flag when I couldn't get an answer on where the money was and how many accounts there were, because
Yeah.
that was the other thing. There was this floating number of accounts. First it was 12, then it was maybe there was 15 accounts, then there was possibly 20 accounts, then there was only 8 accounts that were active. Why were there inactive accounts? So there was this whole conversation about bank accounts as we're trying to scramble and figure out where the finances were actually going to hit for the town so that we could figure out what the funding mechanism was for the town in
Okay.
preparation for the state saying, yeah, you're not getting any sales tax. Because
Right.
that was the rub.
Right.
There was a big call and it was like, is the state going to give us money, or are we like
On your
out of
own.
luck? Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you got to keep in mind, like, sales tax for this town is not a small number, right? I mean, you're
Oh,
talking about
oh
$5 million.
no.
You're talking about
Yes.
$5 million in
Wow.
your budget,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Right? You're
Yes.
talking
That's real.
$5 million in your budget, and you're being told that you either may not get anything or it may be reduced by 20%, right? It's like 20% reduced by 20%. Like, and they were
That's
like,
still
they're like, you're the 20% we think is actually going to happen, but it could be you get nothing. And you know, it's sort of like, you know, you want to make it, you got to make it to the end of the year, and you already budgeted that $5 million in your
Yeah.
wow.
budget,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
it's that's real,
Yeah.
and you're
right,
like, okay, what happens if I have to lay off half my police force? Because
right,
Oh
what
my
does that
God.
mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then or the 911 services, which we didn't do.
right.
We were contemplating shifting that over to the county, and what was the cost going to be to shift it over to the county if we laid off the police officers because we didn't have money to pay the police officers who would pick up the tab. State was like saying, well, we can't do it because we can't do the coverage. That's 60 square miles worth of coverage. There's no way we can
Yeah.
do it. We just don't have the bodies. Besides, that we're in the middle of COVID as well. So there was all this stuff that unfolds. None of the public ever sees any of this, right?
No, no, they didn't see any of it. Any of
And
it.
and that's one of the things. Like, well, so what do you do as town supervisor? You sit behind the desk and act important.
Right.
No, you don't. You do this stuff, and
Right.
Right.
You get your hands
there's
dirty. You get your hands
yeah,
dirty.
you
So
and you
so
really
let's
yeah.
let's move to the present. So you're running for office. Um hoping to get elected on November 4th. Um what is your goal going back into office, and how do you feel if you're dealing with the same people, possibly not all of them are running, but you might be dealing with the same kind of hostility?
Well,
How
I'm that's a really great question because that's a reality on the ground. I honestly was not going to get back into the discussion. That I'd had my fill of being kept quiet for years on on the ability to not lose my indemnification from the town in this ridiculous lawsuit that unfolded. And so I was actually a little relieved when Neil decided to run, and I could just sort of put my life back in order because I'm going to be completely honest, it was really, really hard after I left office because of all of the mishigosh that was going on. So I was okay with the dust settling, and I was putting my life back in order a little bit. And then I just watched the situation continuously get worse. It didn't even slow down, and uh, Neil, for all of his good efforts, really kept hitting that wall. It was the same wall that we hit when we were together on the board. And so when Neil got as close as one vote, it
Yeah.
became clear to me that the town is beginning to smell the problem. Like, you can't keep the fire in the kitchen if the smoke is billowing out into the dining room. People are going to know
Gotcha.
that the turkey's burned. So I was really motivated after that election to, you know, read the zeitgeist a little bit and take an accounting internally of whether or not it would be advantageous to stay in as an advocate or be out in front as a mouthpiece. And then some individuals who've been in this discussion from the very beginning kind of got my ear and said, "Listen, honestly, there's nobody here who really knows the inner workings of the town better than you, and uh, and now's our time. Like, either we're going
Yeah.
to make the argument stick now because there's no way of ignoring the noise around whether or not there's a financial problem, and you're the guy who can do that." So I took a deep accounting of where I was in my headspace, and then I polled my family, and then I polled my family again, and then I polled them a third time, and they all said the same thing, which is, look, there's really nobody better stepping up, and you can't you can't let them just have it.
Yeah.
Ed Diana got the chair because nobody ran against them. So, and the problem is really too big. And right around the time that I was contemplating uh, all of this, I got word of how some of the New York State auditors process was going. And the problem was much, much worse than I had thought. I thought that maybe the town might be on the hook or out somewhere in the ballpark of 12 mil. I thought that the conduit there was really planning department because it was commingling of monies at the general fund level. And I know that this is like a lot of stereo instructions kind of accounting stuff, but this is the important stuff. Like, you're supposed to segregate this stuff, and you're not, escrow money is not supposed to be touched. You're not supposed to mix it up with stuff. And so all of that was occurring, and I thought that the problem was probably about $10 million, and I thought the problem went back to
That's a
somewhere
lot.
around 2016. In varying issues at the financial office and the accounting department. Um, and the initial report, the report that was issued to the town, uh, laid everything right at the town board's feet. That the town board was responsible for all of the bad situations that were unfolding in the town's finances, and more importantly, and this was a real red flag for me, um, the town had underreported its revenues by about $4.1 million a year, and that's
Wow.
that's telling because here's what happens. You get the tax bill goes out, you get the taxes in, the receiver of taxes counts up all the money and says, here's X amount of dollars to the comptroller, and the comptroller delivers the report. Well, somewhere between the collector, the receiver of taxes, and the comptroller, the that money consistently got missed. And wasn't like one time, oops, or
Missed
two
$4
time,
million dollars.
yeah, two times. Well, when you're talking about numbers, and Neil can
Zero
speak to
here,
this,
zero there.
where the decimal point matters.
Eh,
um, So, and this is why it's important that you have really skilled individuals who are doing this stuff.
Part part of that problem was and again, I don't want to get wonky like Frank here, right? But you know, you have to do you could hear like there are actually videos of this, right? The town was on a cash basis accounting, right? Town is supposed to be on modified accrual basis. So, you know, you had things being reported in the wrong year. You had, transfers among different funds, which are technically different businesses, right? You had money, like you had the general fund, like your one fund paying bills for all the funds, right?
Okay.
Well, that you can't do that because you have a fiduciary responsibility to keep all those funds separate, right? Just like he was saying with escrow money. Escrow money, Denise, you worked for a law firm. What happens when you misappropriate escrow money or you use escrow
Oh,
money in a
that's
way
like,
that you
that's
lose your
bad.
license. You
Yeah.
go to jail, right?
It's not
So
legal.
right. And that was actually happening. All that stuff was happening. And so it's hard to ignore that when you find out that. And that was one of the things that was pointed out to us, right, back in 2001 or 2021 by O'Connor Davies. They went through all that stuff and they said, well, you are commingling money. You are paying your, money that should be paid with escrow money. You're paying with your general fund. And, you have these transfers, you have these amounts owed between funds, but they don't reconcile, right? Like, and we were like a year and a half behind on our bank reconciliations, like stupid stuff.
And
That if you do wrong, how do you know what your numbers are?
exactly. And we covered that. We saw
Right.
that with the recent town meeting where we saw that they were off by, I don't know, I think the last audit was like 2021. So we
Yeah.
have a lot
22.
behind. Oh,
22
So,
22.
they have the
yeah. So with
So
all of this stuff, I just realized that it's probably no better mouthpiece at this point to articulate this to the public, to speak to it in a real way, to talk about how the town has missed the mark on all the running. So yes, I decided to throw my name back in the ring here. Here's what I'm going to tell you about getting stuff reorganized.
okay.
I'm pretty I'm pretty certain I know where the gaping holes are. I'm pretty comfortable in knowing that I can figure out where some of the smaller holes are so we can plug all of the leaking. That's item number one. Item number two, if $4.1 million isn't making it into budget, then clearly we don't need $4.1 million. So $4.1 million needs to go back to the taxpayer, full stop.
Okay.
That's
I like
I
that
really
idea.
I wholly believe that. And the other trick to this is that for too long this shady ridiculousness has been going on by the same individuals. It's the same circle of people. They clearly have a modus operandi. Um, I don't know what that might be. I'm not going to speculate on what that might be. I will tell you that if myself and the slate changes, if the tone of the town board changes, we will get to the bottom of who's responsible. We're not
Okay.
going to get the money back, but we'll get to the bottom of who's responsible. Those people are going to be made responsible. What I also can say is this: no more backdoor dealings, no more, 11 o'clock at night, three-way textings to decide what the policy is going to be, no voting in work sessions to make general
That's a big one.
sessions. It's a theater. It's ridiculous and it's infuriating. At every board meeting for the month, everybody gets up there in their Sunday best and they basically puppet what they've decided to do over the course of the month. And it's not actually how it's supposed to happen. It's supposed to be that you actually have a meeting with discussion that is sometimes tabled. It's not cut and dry, and that those things need to be out in the open. So, you know, the video stuff comes back, the work sessions and regular meetings, that those things, the boundaries in those things get taken down. And here's one thing that I think is really frustrating to me as a 57-year-old man. I just outed myself. Um, I can use technology. I have this smartphone that we're talking on right
Yep.
now.
Mm.
Yep.
There's a thing called Survey Monkey. It's been in operation for a decade. Guess what? If you are part of the town alert system, I'm going to send you the resolutions. Everybody in the town, every decision in the town because of public referendum, every single one. We can do that now. And you'll get the
Yep.
resolution and you'll be able to vote yes or no on it. That vote will be tallied by SurveyMonkey. The SurveyMonkey post will be on the website. We don't touch any of that. That's all SurveyMonkey. So you'll know exactly what the town thinks about something as simple as a judge position, which was overwhelmingly overturned. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
board
That
wanted to
was
go one direction and the town said something very different. And I thought to myself, that's a great example of something where the town needs to be more interactive. And I want to tell you, 33,000 or 37,000 people. The biggest thing that I'm hearing knocking on doors is, well, there's this transparency issue, but we don't really, we don't know how to participate. Well, here's how you can participate.
Yeah.
You just fill out your SurveyMonkey when it pings you. It's that simple.
Yep.
It really is that simple.
That
One
is
of the
a
big
great
things,
idea. I like
one of the
that.
big things too is term limits. We want term limits. No
Oh,
more
yeah.
should anybody be sitting at the dais for a decade. Forget a decade. How about 2.5 decades? No way, no
Absolutely.
more. Anybody who has children will tell you, if you put an open cookie jar next to somebody at a table and you just let them sit there indefinitely, you're gonna have missing cookies. So close the
Yeah.
cookie jar and move them off the table. That's the goal. So term limits is a big one.
That's a
That's a
big
real
one.
big one. And that's going to be number one on the list of things that change on day one. On day one, we're planning.
I think what you should also consider too is that for board members, right? Because these board members, one of the things that they did was they voted last year, right, to give themselves lifetime benefits, right? If you're there for 10 years, right? Shockingly, that two of the board members hit their 10 years at the end of this year, right?
Yeah.
Like shockingly, and that was voted on last year. And my question is that right? They voted that one part-time person, right, gets benefits. Okay, not all part-time people, right? Just one part-time person. If you work in the supervisor's office, right, you get these benefits, these health benefits, right? And then these lifetime benefits. I don't see why somebody working 15 hours a week, or 20 hours a week as a part-time job, right? Why they're getting health benefits. Why do town board members get health benefits at all?
Yeah, let me, I got a comment on that because, here we are trying to fight to keep those ACA
Right.
subsidies and and we're pulling people off their health care. But meanwhile, our tax dollars here in the town are going to pay for a part-timer to have lifetime benefits.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous, and I'm with Neil on this one. And it is certainly something that we are very keen to dig into, because it's astounding from a civics place that. And again, I would take this one step back and go up another 10,000 feet and say, well, there's this whole notion that there are a group of people that think that the town is really their meal ticket, and the way to really score big is to work for the government. Well, you know what? That's not the case. And I think if we've learned anything from national politics in the last 6 years, is that I think the general public is really fed up with that attitude.
Yeah.
And they're tired of these individuals sort of living off the hog, so to speak.
Right.
Well, everybody else has got to struggle. So yeah, we're definitely going to be looking into that.
And not
Very
for
good.
nothing. Another thing I want to bring up is the pay. Right, the town of Walkill now has the highest paid supervisor in Orange County. It also has the highest paid board in Orange County. They've increased. Like when I was on the board, it was like we made $15,000 a year as a councilman, right? Which for a part-time job really is less than minimum wage, right? Like I mean, it really was not a lot of money. But now these guys, are making $20,000 a year, right, for this part-time job. Okay. And the supervisor makes $120,000 a year,
I was
right? And they have
122
they
when
have
I checked.
and they have $10,000 stipend, right, to be a deputy. I mean, we're talking crazy. I mean, these people, like, they don't do anything, and they're making all this money, and they drove the finances into the ground where they lost the town's bond rating, right? Like, I mean, something needs to be done
But gave
to
themselves a raise to do
Yes.
to
that.
put
Yeah.
accountability
Yeah.
into the system, right? So that so that these elected officials are held accountable, right, for doing the things that they do. They can't give themselves big raises and drive the town's finances into the ground, or
Well,
drive
and
the
I
town into the ground.
can't agree with that anymore. Emphatically, I'm going to tell you right now. In my opinion, they're playing the town for the room. I mean,
Right.
the thing that rubs everybody the wrong way if you're in New York or about our illustrious president is that everybody in New York, and I will say this specifically as a New Yorker, you can see a grifter, like
Oh
a
yeah.
grift,
Oh yeah.
a grift. This is a grift. Like everything about this is a grift. And so I think and I'm going to tell you, I think that people are fed up with that too.
Yeah.
And I can't, I can't speak to what their motive. I mean, I can assume what their motivations are, but at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter because it's, it's, it's going to change. With me, it's going to change. Now, to your one point though, which we got all the way here without saying, is like, what happens if, it's just me?
Yeah. Well, we know for sure it
Um,
won't be just you.
I'm
Well,
pretty
it's
sure,
you and
honestly,
Steve.
it's more likely not me and the rest of those guys. But I will say this. Um, Everybody on the slate is mission driven. Everybody. This is not I don't know what Ward 1 is doing and I don't know what Ward 4 is doing, and we don't have a Ward 4 guy and the Ward 3 guys cashed out because nobody's running against it. Like, that's not like that at all. Every single person at the table is at the table with a goal, and it's the goals that we just talked about. And so I suspect that there will not be a situation where the majority of the board doesn't change. So I will say, in general public, if I'm not at the table but the board flips, the mission is at least still going
Okay.
because every single person is committed to that mission. If I'm at the table and we're all at the table together, everything that I talked about is a solid goal. It's not maybe we'll do it or we'll look about it. We'll take a poll to create a
Mhm.
committee to review the process, to think about. Yeah, none of that. We're gonna hit it. We're gonna hit it hard. We're done with these maybes. We're gonna actually do some stuff that's gonna be good for the community. Because I
And
will say this: the last thing on this is that everybody at the table, not one of them, is really a politician. They're all in it for the community point of view.
yeah.
And I know you hear that a lot too. Politicians are for the community. These people actually really are for the community. And when I say that, it's not because they're on my team. It's because I've watched what they do in general. I've watched over the last 4 or 5 years. They push to get the vote out, or they are helping the seniors, or they're helping the veterans, or these are really community minded individuals, and not one of them really. This is not their wheelhouse at all.
And these are
Um,
the other folks running for the council positions.
Yeah, do
yeah,
you
So
wanna
yeah.
can
They're
we
not.
mention their
yeah,
names
why
or
don't you
Yeah,
introduce them? Yeah.
absolutely. And I said, like I said, they're not politicians. They are really
but they're
salt of the
community
earth.
members.
They're
That's
community
who
members.
it should
Yeah,
be.
yeah, and they're a sharp lot too. They're all of them are really well schooled in understanding the needs from a financial place. One of them is a government auditor, Alan Baker, who's running in four. We've got an individual running in four. He's running on Walkill winning lines, an independent line. So this isn't about red or blue, right? This is town politics is rarely about red or blue, but this really isn't about red or blue because the slate has somebody on a third party line. So Alan Baker's over in four. Jean Day, she ran against Mark Coyne, I think, in the last go round. She is a real solid, salt of the earth individual, very, very sharp in the healthcare profession. So, her empathy is profound, really.
She's in
And
one, right?
she's
Yep.
in one, correct? Yeah. And then, of course, Stephen Vanella's over in three. He is running unopposed, which is great for him. But it hasn't slowed him down. It's not like, well, I'm not running against anybody. He's actually he walked with Alan and I in four.
Steve's a
He's
great guy.
walking. Yeah, he's a great guy. He's solid. And again, law enforcement, retired law enforcement, NYPD. He's still active law enforcement, Wilbur, Town of Montgomery. So, again, this is a crew that believes in law and order. This is a crew that believes in supporting the police department, supporting the infrastructure of the town. And of course, we have for two, Don Saleo.
Don Saleo.
Don is a great, great guy. Community member for a very long time. Very active in. He's a substitute school teacher, educator. So he's been active in Pine Bush Central School District, Minnesink, Middletown. He knows all the schools that sit in the town. Very active, was the former president for the Town of Wallkill Democratic Committee. So he's pretty well versed in Robert's Rules of Order. He understands the arc of what it means to make a meeting run functionally, and understands also how to navigate sticky spots where not everybody sees eye to eye. So really well versed in the art of the communication. And I think that for that component to be at the table as well, and everybody being mission driven, this is a slate that I think is highly functional and really could solve some problems in the long run.
That sounds great. So how can our audience reach out to you, get in touch with you, support you?
Great. Well, that's a great question too. We all sort of have our own pathways because we are all individuals. We all sort of have our own pathways to finding us. We do have a QR code on our handouts that gets you to a primary page that has our bios on it. You can get to us individually off of that page. Also, we're doing mailers, and our door hangers have individual pathways.
What's the website?
Can you send us a link?
Or just
I absolutely can. I don't have it in front of me right here, but
so that we can post
I'll
a comment
in the I'll post it in the comments. So just give us all your contact information. Do you have a Facebook page? Is it
we do have a Facebook page. I think each of the candidates has an individual Facebook page, and then
what about do you have one?
Well, we do have a Facebook page.
Okay.
And each of the candidates also has a Facebook page.
Got
so
it.
There's multiple routes there. I think at least 3 of us have our own websites. I have my own website. I believe Alan has his own website as well.
Candidate Don Fred DenDanto.
Frank Dandanto. You can get there by Frank 4 Supervisor. Frank number 4 Supervisor.com.
Got it. Okay.
That'll get you to my website. You can contribute there. My address and campaign mailing is there. You can send me a check. You can find me on the street. You can just come and make some phone calls for us. You can just be available to talk about your experiences and tell me a little bit about your ideas, because quite honestly, it's a group project and everybody needs to be represented at the group, and the more perspectives we have, the better it's going to be. So yeah, that's how you can get a hold of us.
Very good. All right. Well, this has been great. We got a lot of information. So again, everybody, vote for Frank Dandanto for Town of Wallkill Supervisor. My God, I made the same mistake last week. I was mixing up the Town of Wallkill and Warwick. But it's been great having you. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll collect the links. And I'll get them down beneath where you can reach out to Frank and also his additional council people that are running, candidates that are running for council. We hope to get them on here too, and we will see you soon. Drop any comments if you have questions. We will get them to Frank. All right, and
please do send me them for sure.
Yeah, so like, share, and subscribe. We will see you guys soon. Thanks so much, guys. All right.
Peace out.
Peace.